I stood on the front porch of my colonial-style house in Harmony Hills, HOA, staring at the wreath of holly and ivy hanging on the door. It was tasteful. It was expensive. It was exactly the kind of decoration Karen Voss would choose to signal to every neighbor that everything inside the community was perfect. The air was biting, a typical frozen December night in suburban Illinois. But the chill running down my spine had nothing to do with the temperature. I had not wanted to come. I had spent the last decade distancing myself from the petty tyrants who ran this place like their personal fiefdom, building a life that did not require their approval or their toxic brand of community standards. But Aunt Loretta had called. Loretta did not beg. That was not her way. She was a woman of stiff spine and few words, the only person on the HOA board who had ever looked at me and seen a human being rather than a walking violation. When she called me 3 days ago, her voice had a tremor I had never heard before. She told me this was important. She told me I needed to come home for the annual HOA holiday gala. Not for them, but for myself. She sounded like she was guarding a secret that was physically burning her, and against my better judgment, I listened. I smoothed the front of my wool coat, took a breath that tasted of snow and wood smoke, and opened the door. The interior of the community clubhouse was a spread from a lifestyle magazine. The scent of roasted rosemary chicken and cinnamon candles was overwhelming, a cloying sweetness designed to mask the rot in the foundation. The hardwood floors gleamed under the soft yellow light of the chandelier. I knew those floors well. I knew exactly how much they cost. I knew the price of the crown molding, the granite countertops in the kitchen, and the new roof that kept the snow out. I knew these things because 6 months ago, I had written a check for $720,000 to the bank to stop the foreclosure proceedings Karen had hidden from everyone until the sheriff was nearly at the gate. I walked into the dining hall. They were already seated. My father, Franklin Cook, sat at the head of the table. He still chaired the finance committee even though everyone knew Karen Voss ran the show. To his right sat Karen, my stepmother and HOA president, wearing a cashmere sweater and a smile that did not reach her eyes. And there was Sienna, my younger sister, the golden child, 22 and glowing with the anticipation of her upcoming graduation, looking at her phone under the table. Reagan, my father said. It was not a greeting. It was an acknowledgement of presence, dry and devoid of warmth. You made it. Traffic was light, I said. I took the empty seat across from Aunt Loretta. She looked pale. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, her knuckles white when our eyes met. She gave a microscopic nod, a signal that terrified me more than it reassured me. The dinner commenced with the usual pageantry. Karen asked about my job in the city with the polite disinterest one offers a distant cousin. I gave short, functional answers. I was 37 years old, a senior partner at a logistics firm. Yet, in this clubhouse, under these ridiculous HOA rules about flag sizes and grass heights, I felt the old familiar shrinking sensation, but I fought it. I touched the heavy linen napkin on my lap and reminded myself of the wire transfer. $720,000. That number was my armor. It was the proof that I was the adult here. I was the savior. I was the reason this entire neighborhood wasn't auctioned off lot by lot. However, the air was thick with something unsaid. Every time I reached for the water pitcher, conversation stalled. Every time I shifted in my chair, Karen flinched. They were avoiding the subject. They were eating the food I effectively paid for, heating the clubhouse with the furnace I secured, and yet nobody mentioned the massive HOA lien. The silence around my financial rescue was active, a heavy blanket they were all holding down by the corners. The meal progressed to the main course. Franklin poured himself another glass of red wine. He swirled the liquid, watching the legs run down the glass, and then he cleared his throat. The sound was like a gavel striking a podium. I have an announcement, Franklin said. He stood up. He liked standing up. It gave him the height advantage he felt he deserved. Naturally, Sienna put her phone away and feigned surprise, though the smug set of her mouth told me she had rehearsed this scene. Karen clasped her hands together, beaming up at her husband. As we all know, Franklin began, his voice booming with performative paternal pride. Our little Sienna is graduating from the Marlowe Conservatory next month. It has been a long road, and we are incredibly proud of the woman she has become. He looked at Sienna, his eyes glistening with tears that I suspected were induced more by the expensive wine than genuine emotion. Graduating with honors, Karen added, chirping from the sidelines. With honors, Franklin corrected, nodding. It is a milestone, and for such a milestone, we felt a grand gesture was in order. We wanted to give Sienna a start in life that reflects how much we cherish her. My stomach tightened. I glanced at Aunt Loretta. She was staring at her plate. Her jaw set so hard I could see the muscle twitching. Franklin turned his gaze toward me. It was not a warm look. It was a challenge. Reagan, I know you stepped in 6 months ago. I know you paid off the $720,000 on the HOA emergency assessment. He said the number quickly, brushing past it as if it were a minor inconvenience, like a parking ticket I had handled for him. He did not say thank you. He did not say saved us. He said stepped in. However, Franklin continued, his voice gaining strength, Karen and I have been discussing the future of this community. You have your life in the city, Reagan. You are established. You are independent. Sienna is just starting out. She needs stability. She needs a foundation. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. I knew what was coming. The logic was perverse, twisted, and entirely consistent with Karen Voss's worldview. So, he said, smiling benevolently at Sienna, we have decided that the special ownership rights to the community clubhouse and the deed transfer clause on your property will be transferred to Sienna. It is her graduation gift. The silence that followed was absolute. I stared at him. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. The words replayed in my mind, rearranging themselves to make sense, but they refused to settle into anything logical. You are giving her the clubhouse rights, I said, my voice low, steady, on the property I just paid for? Technically, Karen interjected, waving a hand dismissively, her voice sweet as saccharin. You paid off the lien, but the title was still in the HOA's name and ours as board. We are the stewards, and as stewards, we are choosing to gift it to the child who needs it most. She needs it most, I repeated. I paid $720,000. Karen, that is nearly $350,000, and you are gifting it to Sienna. You can afford it, Karen sighed, her voice shrill. You have always been good with money. Reagan, you have your apartment. You have your career. Sienna has nothing yet. Why are you so greedy? Why can you not be happy for your sister? Greedy? The word hung in the air, ridiculous and sharp. Sienna looked at me, her eyes wide with false innocence. Reagan, honestly, I thought you would be happy to help. You always act like you are so superior because you have money. Now you actually did something good with it. Don't ruin this for me. I looked at the three of them, a triumvirate of delusion. They truly believed this. They had rewritten reality in their heads so that my sacrifice was their entitlement. They had taken my life savings, my financial security, and wrapped it in a bow for the girl who had never worked a day in her life. But Karen was not finished. She was still standing, and I could see she had one more round in the chamber. There is one more thing, she said. The graduation gala next week. It is going to be a big event. All of Sienna's friends, their parents, important people from the conservatory. It is a night of celebration. She paused, taking a sip of wine. Sienna does not want you there. I blinked. Excuse me? You bring negative energy, Karen said, struggling to find a word that made her sound like a victim. You sit in the corner and judge everyone. You make people uncomfortable. This is Sienna's night. We cannot have you casting a shadow over it. So it is best if you do not attend. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. First the theft of my money, then the theft of the property rights, and now the eraser of my presence. They wanted my resources, but they did not want me. I was the engine that kept their lights on, but I was not allowed to be seen in the light. I looked at Sienna. She smirked. It was a tiny thing, a quick twitch of the lips, but I saw it. She had won. She had the clubhouse. She had the party. She had the parents. And I had a bank statement showing a balance of zero where $720,000 used to be. In that moment, I expected to feel tears. I expected the familiar burn of rejection that had defined my childhood. The sobbing in the bathroom while they watched movies downstairs. I waited for the grief, but it did not come. Instead, a cold clarity washed over me. It started at the base of my neck and spread through my limbs, cooling my blood, slowing my heart rate. It was the absence of fear. It was the death of hope. Yes, but with the death of hope came the death of obligation. They had pushed too far. I picked up my wine glass. I took a slow sip. The wine was cheap. A $20 bottle masquerading as a vintage. Fitting. I set the glass down with a deliberate click. So, I said to clarify, I paid the debt. Sienna gets the asset and I am banned from the celebration. Do not make this dramatic. Reagan, Karen sighed. It is just a party and it is just a clubhouse. You are family. We love you, but you need to learn to share. Share, I echoed. I turned my head slowly to the right. I looked at Aunt Loretta. She was trembling. Her face was gray. Her eyes locked on mine, filled with a mixture of terror and determination. She knew. She knew something that they did not. She had called me here because she knew this ambush was coming. But she also knew something else. She had a weapon. She had been hiding it, waiting for the right moment, terrified to use it. I looked at her and I communicated without words. I let her see the ice in my eyes. I let her see that the niece she worried about, the girl who always tried to please them, was gone. Aunt Loretta, I said. My voice was loud. It projected to the corners of the room, bouncing off the expensive crown molding. Karen frowned. Leave Loretta out of this. She agrees with us. No, I said, not looking away from my aunt. I don't think she does. The room went deadly quiet. Even the ticking clock seemed to hold its breath. Loretta, Karen barked. Tell her. Loretta looked at her brother. Then she looked at Karen. Finally, she looked at Sienna, who was starting to look less like a winner and more like a child who realizes the woods are darker than she thought. Then Loretta looked back at me. She took a breath. I smiled. It was not a nice smile. Do you want to say it? I asked her, my voice gentle but lethal. Or should I? The effect was instantaneous. Karen's face drained of color. The flush of wine vanished, leaving her skin the color of old parchment. She knew that tone. She did not know what I knew, but she knew the tone of a creditor coming to collect. My father's hand jerked and his fork clattered onto his fine china plate with a sound like a gunshot. Clang. Sienna froze. She looked from me to Loretta and back again for the first time all night. The smugness evaporated. She sniffed the air, animalistic and instinctual. She smelled smoke. She realized, perhaps for the first time in her pampered life, that the ground beneath her feet was not solid. I held the silence. I let it stretch until it was agonizing. I let them sit in the confusion and the rising panic. I did not wait for an answer. I did not need one. The fear in their eyes was the appetizer. I picked up my linen napkin. I folded it once neatly corner to corner. I placed it on the table beside my untouched plate. It was a soft movement. It made almost no sound. But in the unnatural quiet of that dining room, the motion felt heavy, felt final. It was not a napkin being put down. It was the sound of a gavel hitting the block. It was the sound of the safety being clicked off on a weapon. The dinner was over. The war had begun. My Aunt Loretta did not wait for Karen to respond to my threat. She moved with a speed that defied her 60 years, her fingers clamping around my wrist like a vice before Franklin could sputter out a defense or Karen could launch into another shrill denial. Loretta dragged me away from the mahogany table. We moved out of the dining hall, past the foyer where the family portraits mocked me. Smiling faces of Franklin, Karen, and Sienna, with me noticeably absent, and into the small library at the back of the clubhouse. She shut the heavy oak door and turned the brass lock. The click was loud in the sudden silence. The muffled sounds of the dining hall, the scraping of chairs, the confused murmuring felt 1,000 miles away. "I should have told you sooner," Loretta whispered, her voice thin, brittle. She was not looking at me. She was looking at the bookshelf, her hands trembling as she reached behind a row of dusty encyclopedias. "God help me, Reagan. I should have told you 10 years ago." "Told me what?" I asked. My heart was still hammering from the confrontation, but my mind was shifting gears. The adrenaline was cooling into a sharp, icy focus. Loretta pulled out a thick plastic accordion file. It was ugly, beige, and stained with coffee rings, the kind of cheap organizer you buy at a drugstore. It looked completely out of place in this clubhouse of curated perfection. She pressed it into my hands. Felt heavy, not just with paper, but with the weight of time. "Sit down," she commanded. I sat on the leather armchair. I undid the elastic band. It snapped against the plastic. A sharp sound that made Loretta flinch. I opened the flap. Inside was a chaotic history of my life that I had never seen. The first document I pulled out was a bank statement. The logo was old from a bank that had been acquired and renamed twice since the 90s. The name at the top of the account was the Elena Cook HOA Trust. Elena. My mother. I felt a phantom punch to the gut. My mother had died when I was 7. I had been told there was no life insurance. No savings. That illness had drained everything. Franklin had played the role of the struggling widower perfectly, using it to garner sympathy and eventually to court Karen. "What is this?" I asked. My voice sounded hollow. "Keep reading," Loretta said. She was pacing the small room now, hugging her arms around herself. I scanned the numbers. The trust had been established the year I was born. My mother's family had money, not millions, but enough old money from a grandmother I barely remembered. According to the opening balance on the statement dated 1995, there was $300,000 in the account. $300,000 in 1995 if left alone with compound interest and decent market performance. That money should have grown into a substantial safety net. It should have been my college fund. It should have been my down payment on a condo. It should have been my freedom. I flipped the page. The dates jumped forward. 2002, 2005, 2008. Instead of growth, there were withdrawals. They drained it. I whispered. It was not a question. The numbers were right there in black and white. Systematically over the course of 15 years, the balance had been chipped away. $5,000 here, $10,000 there. A sudden withdrawal of $20,000 for educational expenses during a year when I was attending public high school and working nights at a diner to save for a car. I pulled out a photocopy of a withdrawal authorization form. It was dated 2 months after my 18th birthday. I, Reagan Cook, hereby authorized the release of $15,000 for personal maintenance. At the bottom was a signature. Reagan Cook. I stared at the ink. I traced the loop of the R with my thumb. It was flamboyant, leaning heavily to the left. "That is not my signature," I said. The calm in my voice terrified me. It was the calm of a person watching a building collapse in slow motion. "I do not sign like that. I have never signed like that." "I know," Loretta said softly. She stopped pacing and stood in front of me. "Karen signed it. She used to practice on legal pads at the kitchen table. She thought it looked elegant. Of course. Karen." I shuffled deeper into the stack. There were letters from the bank questioning certain transactions, followed by angry, blustering replies from my father on my behalf, allegedly threatening to move the account if they did not process the requests immediately. There were credit card applications in my name that had been opened when I was away at college, maxed out, and then paid off using the trust money to hide the paper trail. But then I found the smoking gun. It was a cashier's check receipt stapled to a real estate transfer document. The date was exactly 18 years ago. The amount was $80,000. The memo line read, "Down payment, Harmony Hills clubhouse renovation." I froze. My lungs refused to take in air. I looked up at the ceiling at the crown molding of the very room I was sitting in. "This clubhouse," I said. "This clubhouse." "Yes," Loretta said. She sank onto the ottoman opposite me, her face crumbling. "They used your mother's money for the down payment. Reagan, $80,000 of her legacy to you went into buying and renovating this place. And then they took out a massive HOA lien for the rest. A lien they never intended to pay off properly because they kept refinancing it to fund their lifestyle." I closed my eyes. The math rearranged itself in my head, cold and brutal. I had just paid $720,000 to pay off the lien on this clubhouse. I had thought I was saving the neighborhood from bankruptcy. I thought I was being the beautiful daughter, the savior. But I wasn't just paying their debt. I was paying for the clubhouse twice. The first time they stole my inheritance to buy it. The second time they guilt me into paying off the lien they took out against it. And now they were gifting the rights to Sienna. My sister was getting a clubhouse bought with my mother's money and paid for with my labor. It was a perfect circle of parasitism. "Why do you have these?" I asked Loretta. "Why didn't you stop them?" "I was scared," Loretta confessed, her voice cracking. "Karen has a way of twisting things. She told me the trust was meant for the community and that since you were part of the community, it was legal. I knew it wasn't. I tried to argue with her once in 2004. She told me if I ever mentioned it, she would cut me off. She would make sure I never served on the board again and that the fines would bury me." She reached out and touched the plastic file. "I stole the statements from her office. I made copies of the authorization forms whenever she left them out. I knew she would shred the originals eventually. I knew a day would come when she would try to erase the past. I didn't think she would go this far. I didn't think she would try to erase you completely." I looked down at the papers again. The anger that had been simmering in the dining hall was gone. It had been replaced by something far more useful: validation. For years, they had gaslighted me. They called me cold. They called me ungrateful. They told me I imagined the slights, the neglect. They made me feel crazy for thinking they exploited me. But here it was. Proof. Empirical, tangible, quantifiable proof. They were thieves. My father was a thief. My stepmother Karen was a forger. And my sister was the beneficiary of a long con that had spanned 3 decades. I stood up. My legs felt steady, stronger than they had ever felt in this clubhouse. "Reagan," Loretta said, looking up at me fearfully. "What are you going to do? Are you going to go back in there and scream at them? It won't work. Karen will deny it. She will say these are fake. She will spin it." "No," I said. I carefully closed the accordion file. I fastened the elastic band with a snap. "I am not going to scream. Screaming is for people who are helpless. Screaming is what Sienna does when she does not get her way." I walked over to the window. Outside, The snow was falling softly on the driveway, covering my car. It looked peaceful. It was a stark contrast to the violence contained in the folder I was holding. If I go in there and confront them, I said, staring at my reflection in the dark glass, Dad will play the victim. He will say I am ruining Christmas. He will say I am jealous of Sienna. He will make it about emotion. And in a battle of emotions, he always wins because he has no shame. I turned back to Loretta. I am going to leave, I said. I am going to take this folder and I am going to drive back to the city and then, Loretta asked, and then, I am going to introduce them to the only thing Karen Voss respects, I said. Consequences. I looked at the folder in my hand. It wasn't just paper anymore. It was a blade. They used the HOA bylaws to steal from me, I said, my voice dropping to a register that was almost a growl. They used power of attorney, trust statutes, and property deeds. They think the law is a shield that protects them because they are respectable people in a nice neighborhood. I walked to the door and unlocked it. I turned to my aunt. She looked small and frightened, but relieved. She had finally offloaded the poison she had been carrying. You said they wanted to give Sienna a gift, I said. They like giving gifts. Fine. I will give them back. Give them what? Loretta asked. I smiled. And this time it was genuine. It was the smile of a predator who has just realized the cage door is open. I will gift them the law, I said. Every single letter of it. I opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The laughter from the dining hall drifted toward me. Franklin was making a toast. I could hear the clinking of crystal glasses. They were celebrating their victory. They were celebrating the eraser of Reagan Cook. Let them toast. Let them drink their expensive wine. I tightened my grip on the file. I did not go back to the dining hall to say goodbye. I walked straight to the front door, grabbed my coat, and walked out into the cold, biting night. The engine of my car roared to life, a sound like a beast waking up. As I backed out of the driveway, looking at the clubhouse one last time, I didn't see a community asset. I saw a crime scene and I was the detective who had just found the murder weapon. 2 days after the holiday dinner that ended in a declaration of war, I sat in a leather chair that likely cost more than my first car. The office of Gavin Holt was located on the 42nd floor of a glass obelisk in downtown Chicago. The view was gray and steel, matching my mood perfectly. Gavin Holt did not look like a man who comforted crying widows. He looked like a shark in a tailored Navy suit. He was in his late 40s, silver-haired with eyes that assessed value rather than character. He had been my corporate counsel for years, handling complex logistics contracts for my firm, but this was the first time I had brought him something personal. He sat across from me, his desk an expanse of polished ebony. On it lay 2 piles of documents. The first was the dirty coffee-stained accordion folder Aunt Loretta had given me detailing the theft of my mother's trust. The second was a crisp blue folder I had brought with me. Gavin finished reading the last page of the trust documents. He closed the file, took off his reading glasses, and looked at me. Reagan, he said, his voice a baritone rumble devoid of unnecessary sympathy. I have gone through the trust history. It is a mess. It is a clear breach of fiduciary duty. We can prove embezzlement, fraud, and likely forgery regarding the withdrawal slip signed by Reagan Cook when you were clearly in a different state attending college. I know, I said. I want them to pay it back. All of it with interest. Gavin leaned back, steepling his fingers. We can certainly file a civil suit. We can drag them through discovery. We can make their lives miserable, but litigation takes time, years potentially, and if they have spent the money, which judging by their lifestyle, they have, a judgment is just a piece of paper. You cannot get blood from a stone. He paused, studying my face. So, I have to ask you a question before we proceed. Do you want justice or do you want to win? I looked him in the eye. I want both. Gavin smiled. It was a sharp, predatory expression. Good answer. Because the trust fund is just the weapon. It is the sword we will swing eventually. But to win, and to win quickly, we need leverage. We need a chokehold. He reached for the second folder, the blue one. This was the file containing the paperwork from 6 months ago. The paperwork regarding the $720,000 wire transfer I had sent to the bank to stop the foreclosure on the HOA clubhouse in Harmony Hills. Now, Gavin said, opening the blue folder. Let us talk about this clubhouse. The one your stepmother so graciously tried to gift to your sister over roast chicken. She thinks she owns it, I said. She thinks I just paid off the community debt like a good little resident. People often mistake generosity for stupidity, Gavin murmured. He flipped through the pages. You drafted these terms yourself. I used a standard template from our firm's real estate division, I replied, and I added an addendum. I told Dad it was standard restructuring language required by the lender to process a third-party payoff without triggering a tax event. He was panicked. The sheriff was scheduled to serve the eviction notice in 48 hours. He was crying on the phone. Panic makes people blind, Gavin noted. He stopped at page 14 of the agreement. He tapped the paper with his index finger. And here it is, Gavin said, his voice dropping to a whisper of pure appreciation. The kill switch. I leaned forward, looking at the clause I had inserted 6 months ago. At the time, I hadn't planned on revenge. I had just been practical. I knew my father was bad with money. I knew Karen was a spender. I wanted to protect my investment. I never imagined I would need it to stop a graduation gift. But my subconscious had apparently been playing chess while the rest of me was playing checkers. Clause 14.2 nearly ignored by everyone. Gavin read aloud. Upon satisfaction of the outstanding HOA lien principal of $720,000 by the payer, Reagan Cook, the title holders, Franklin Cook and Karen Voss, agreed to immediately execute a quitclaim deed, transferring 50% undivided interest in the community clubhouse property located at Harmony Hills to Reagan Cook, creating a joint tenancy with rights of survivorship. Gavin looked up, his eyes gleaming. You are on the deed, he said. I am, I confirmed. It was filed with the county recorder 3 days after the wire transfer cleared. I have the stamped copy right there. And they signed this? Gavin asked almost incredulously. They signed it without reading it, I said. Karen was too busy looking at luxury catalogs, planning what she would buy now that the lien was gone. Franklin just wanted the bank off his back. They saw the check. Gavin. They saw a $720,000 landing in the escrow account, and they would have signed a pact with the devil to get their hands on it. Well, Gavin said, closing the folder with a satisfying thud. You are the devil then, and they are in hell. They just do not know it yet. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the city. This changes everything. Your stepmother cannot gift those clubhouse rights to Sienna. She cannot sell it. She cannot refinance it. She cannot even repaint the front door a different color without your written consent. Legally, the board owns 50%. You own 50%. And in the state of Illinois, you cannot alienate or transfer a property held in joint tenancy without the agreement of all tenants. So the gift is void, I said. The gift is a fantasy, Gavin corrected. If she tries to sign a deed transferring the rights to Sienna, the title company will flag it immediately. It will be rejected. It is a legal impossibility. I felt a surge of cold satisfaction. She announced it to the whole board. She told Sienna it was hers. Then she lied, Gavin said. Or she is delusional. Probably both. He turned back to me. So here is the plan. We have 2 fronts. Front 1 is the trust fund. That is the civil suit. We draft a complaint detailing the embezzlement, the fraud, and the breach of fiduciary duty. We ask for a full accounting of the last 20 years. We demand repayment of the principal plus statutory interest. That will terrify them. That carries the threat of criminal charges. Though we keep that in our back pocket for now. And front two? I asked. Front two is the clubhouse, Gavin said. This is where we have fun. We do not tell them about the deed yet. I frowned. Why not? If I tell them now, it stops the party. It stops the humiliation. No, Gavin shook his head. If you tell them now, they have time to spin it. They have time to play the victim. They will tell Sienna you tricked them, that you stole the clubhouse. They will make you the villain in the neighborhood group chat. He walked back to his desk and leaned over, his voice low and conspiratorial. We let them proceed, Gavin said. We let them believe they are in control. We let Sienna pick out curtains. We let Karen brag to her golf buddies. We let them invest their ego and their reputation into this graduation gift. We wait until they are fully committed, until the point of no return. And then we pull the rug. Gavin said, we file a motion to partition the property. Or better yet, we simply enforce your rights as an owner, but we do it in a way that forces them to reveal their own incompetence. You said you wanted to manipulate them into making mistakes. Yes. Then we apply pressure, Gavin said. I will send a formal letter regarding the trust fund first. Just an inquiry, friendly, but firm, asking for records. That will make Karen panic. When Karen panics, she makes rash financial decisions. She might try to take out a home equity line of credit on the clubhouse to pay you off or to hire a lawyer. And she can't, I realized, because she needs my signature. Exactly, Gavin grinned. She will walk into a bank, ask for money against the clubhouse, and the loan officer will tell her, I am sorry, Mrs. Voss, but we need your stepdaughter, the co-owner, to sign this. That is how she finds out. Not from you, but from a stranger at a bank, telling her she is not the queen of her castle anymore. It was perfect. It was cruel, efficient, and entirely legal. There is one rule, Reagan, Gavin said, his face turning serious again. You must remain spotless. Do not text them angry messages. Do not threaten them. Do not break into the clubhouse to look for more evidence. You must be the grieving daughter who just wants clarity on her mother's legacy. You must be the generous donor who saved the community home. We win by standing firmly on the right side of the law while they slip and slide in the mud of their own lies. I can do that, I said. I have had a lifetime of practice holding my tongue. Good, Gavin said. I will draft the inquiry letter regarding the trust today. It will arrive at their house in 48 hours. By Friday, the atmosphere in that clubhouse will change from celebration to siege mode. He handed me the blue folder back. Keep this safe, he said. This is your shield. The accordion folder is your sword. We are going to bleed them dry. Reagan, not because we are mean, but because they signed the contract. I took the folder. The weight of it felt different now. It wasn't just paper. It was a lock. And I held the only key. Thank you, Gavin, I said. Do not thank me yet, he replied, already turning back to his computer screen. Thank me when the sheriff serves them the papers. I stood up and walked out of the office. My heels clicked rhythmically on the marble floor of the lobby, a sound that echoed like a metronome counting down the time left in Karen's delusion. I stepped out of the building and into the biting wind of the Chicago winter. The cold felt bracing, not harsh. It felt like clarity. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I pulled it out. The screen lit up with a notification. It was a text message from a number I had not saved, but I recognized the area code. It was a Harmony Hills number. I unlocked the phone. The message was from Madison Klein. Madison had been my roommate for one semester in college before she dropped out. She was not a close friend. In fact, She had spent most of that semester borrowing my clothes without asking and flirting with my boyfriends. But she had remained in Harmony Hills's orbit, a satellite that gravitated toward money and gossip. Last I heard, she was trying to become a lifestyle influencer and was desperately clinging to Sienna's social circle because Sienna was younger, prettier, and currently the center of attention. The message read, "Hey girl, long time no see. OMG, I heard about the drama at Christmas dinner. Are you okay? Sienna is posting some crazy stuff. I just wanted to check on you. Let's grab coffee if you're in town. Miss you. XOXO. I stared at the screen. Miss you. We hadn't spoken in 8 years. I read between the lines. The excessive exclamation points. The OMG. The feigned concern. This wasn't a friend reaching out. Madison didn't care about me. Madison cared about proximity to the drama. She was fishing. Sienna had sent her. I could see the scene in my head perfectly. Sienna and Karen sitting in the kitchen, panicked about my threat at the dinner table, wondering what I knew. They needed intel. They needed to know if I was bluffing or if I actually had ammunition. So they deployed Madison, the old friend, to act as a double agent. A normal person would be hurt. A normal person would block the number. But I was not feeling normal today. I was the owner of 50% of the community clubhouse and the plaintiff in a looming 6-figure lawsuit. I smiled. It was the first time I had smiled genuinely since Christmas. I have a spy, I whispered to the cold wind. I typed a reply, my fingers moving quickly. I didn't agree to coffee yet. I didn't give anything away. I just typed enough to set the hook. Hey, Madison. Thanks for reaching out. It's been really hard. I'm actually meeting with my bank right now. I found some weird errors on my old accounts. Probably nothing, but I'm stressed. Coffee sounds great soon. I hit send. Weird errors. Bank. That would get back to Sienna in 5 minutes. They would think I was looking at the bank errors. Focusing on the small stuff, maybe the old credit cards. They wouldn't suspect I was coming for the clubhouse. They wouldn't suspect I was coming for the trust. It would send them scrambling in the wrong direction. I spent the next hour doing what any modern general does before a battle. I gathered intelligence. I sat in my car, parked a few blocks away from Gavin's office, and scrolled through Instagram. Madison Klein was an open book. Provided that book was written in hashtags and desperation, it did not take long to confirm my suspicions. Her feed was a shrine to her proximity to perceived wealth. There were photos of brunch, photos of shoes she likely returned after wearing, and most importantly, photos of Sienna. There was Sienna at a bridal shower I wasn't invited to. Sienna at a vineyard. Sienna and Madison pouting at the camera with the caption, "Sisters by soul, not by blood." That caption almost made me laugh out loud. Sisters by soul. It was perfect. Madison was the parasitic remora to Sienna's shark. She was clearly trying to leverage Sienna's upcoming graduation party of the century into some sort of social climbing ladder for herself. If Sienna went down, Madison's access to the VIP tent went down with her. She was not checking on me. She was a reconnaissance drone sent by the enemy. I typed a reply to her text. I am free at 4 this afternoon. The Blue Heron on State Street. I really need to vent. The response came back in 30 seconds. See you there. Hang in there, babe. I drove home to my apartment, but not to relax. I needed a costume for the last 2 days. I had been operating with cold, sharp precision. I had been dressed in power suits, my hair slicked back, my makeup flawless. That was Reagan the Avenger. But Madison was not expecting the Avenger. She was expecting the victim. I changed into a pair of oversized gray sweatpants and a hoodie that looked slightly too worn. I washed my face and applied just a touch of concealer under my eyes, not to hide dark circles, but to accentuate them. I tied my hair back in a loose, messy bun that suggested I hadn't brushed it since yesterday. I looked in the mirror. I looked tired. I looked defeated. I looked like a woman who was overwhelmed by bureaucracy and neighborhood trauma. It was perfect. I walked into the Blue Heron at 10 minutes past 4. Being late was part of the act. It suggested disorganization, a lack of control. Madison was already there, sitting at a window table, looking conspicuously glamorous in a faux fur vest and oversized sunglasses, even though it was overcast. She stood up when she saw me, opening her arms wide. "Reagan," she squealed, drawing the attention of half the coffee shop. "Oh my God, look at you," she hugged me. She smelled of expensive perfume and insincerity. "Hi, Madison," I said, letting my voice sound thin and ready. "Thanks for coming." We sat down. She ordered a complicated latte with oat milk and sugar-free syrup. I ordered a black coffee and stared into the cup as if the secrets of the universe were drowning in it. "So," Madison said, leaning forward, her elbows on the table. She lowered her sunglasses to peer at me. "Tell me everything. I heard your stepmom was intense at Christmas. Sienna is absolutely devastated. By the way, she's been crying for 2 days." I suppressed the urge to roll my eyes. Sienna crying was about as rare as rain in Seattle and usually just as calculated to get something to grow. "It's not just the dinner," I said, rubbing my temples. "The dinner was awful." "Sure. But it is what I found out afterwards that is making me sick." Madison's eyes widened. The predator in her woke up. What did you find out?" I looked around the shop, feigning paranoia. I leaned in close. "It is the bank," I whispered. Madison blinked. "The bank like your dad's bank. The bank that held the HOA lien." I lied. "The one I sent the $720,000 to. I went to review the transaction history because I was going to try and reverse the payment. You know, since they kicked me out of the community." "You can do that?" Madison asked, her voice sharp. She was memorizing this. "I thought I could," I said, letting out a shaky sigh. "But when I started looking at the old statements to prove my identity, I found errors. Massive errors. The bank has been mishandling that lien for 20 years. Interest rates that don't match the contracts. Fees that appeared out of nowhere. And the worst part," I paused for dramatic effect. Madison was leaning so far forward she was practically dipping her chin in my coffee. "The worst part is that they lost the payoff confirmation. They are saying the $720,000 is in a holding account pending an internal audit. They are freezing everything." "Freezing everything?" Madison repeated. "What does that mean for the clubhouse?" "It means the clubhouse is in limbo," I said, my voice trembling. "And because I found these errors, my lawyer says we have to sue the bank. We have to subpoena every single document from 1995 to the present. Every signature, every withdrawal, every transfer. We are going to turn that bank inside out." I watched Madison's face. She was trying to process the information. She was thinking about what this meant for Sienna. If I was suing the bank, I wasn't suing Karen. That was good news for them. But if I was dragging up 20 years of financial history, that was bad news. "But," Madison said, trying to sound casual, "why do you need the old stuff? Can't you just get your money back?" "It is complicated," I said. "To prove the bank was negligent, we have to show a pattern of mismanagement. My lawyer is drafting a subpoena right now. He is going to request the original wet ink signatures for every document Karen ever signed. He thinks the bank might have forged some things to cover their tracks." This was the hook. I knew and Aunt Loretta knew that the bank hadn't forged anything. Karen had forged the signatures. But by telling Madison that I suspected the bank of forgery, I was handing Karen a terrifying scenario. If I subpoenaed the documents to catch the bank, I would inadvertently catch Karen. And if Karen knew a forensic document examiner was about to look at those papers, she would panic. "Wow," Madison said. That sounds intense. Does your dad know? Not yet, I said. I don't want to worry him. He thinks the clubhouse is safe. He thinks Sienna is getting it next month. I don't have the heart to tell him that once the federal regulators get involved, the asset might be seized as evidence. Seized, Madison squeaked. Evidence of banking fraud. I nodded gravely. It could take years to resolve. The clubhouse could be boarded up until the investigation is over. Madison looked horrifyingly pale beneath her bronzer. She was imagining the graduation party. She was imagining the guests arriving at a clubhouse with federal tape on the door. She was imagining the social suicide. You poor thing, she said, reaching out to pat my hand. Her hand was cold. You are just trying to help. And now this. I know, I said. I just feel so guilty. I feel like I opened a Pandora's box. But I have to get my money back. Madison. $720,000. I can't just walk away from that. No. Of course not, she said, distracted. She glanced at her phone. She was dying to text Sienna. She needed to leave. I should probably go, I said, wiping a fake tear from my eye. I have to meet with the forensic accountant at 5:30. He is going to run a trace on the IP addresses of all the online banking logins. He thinks he can prove the bank was logging in from their own servers to manipulate the data. Another lie. The IP addresses would point to Karen's house. But stating it this way made it sound like an unstoppable technical juggernaut was coming their way. You are so brave, Madison said. Really? Go get him. Tiger. She didn't even finish her latte. We hugged again in a hollow embrace of two people playing different games, and she rushed out the door, her phone already pressed to her ear before she hit the sidewalk. I stayed in the coffee shop for another 10 minutes, drinking my black coffee. The caffeine felt good. The performance had been exhausting, but the payoff would be worth it. I walked back to my car and called Gavin. How was the date? Gavin asked. She took the bait, I said. Hook, line, and sinker. She thinks I am suing the bank for fraud, and that a team of federal investigators is about to seize the clubhouse as evidence. Gavin laughed. It was a dry, dusty sound. Federal investigators? Nice touch. That will put the fear of God into them. I need one more thing, I said. To sell it, I need an email. Tell me, Gavin said. I explained. Subject line: Urgent discrepancies in Cook HOA lien history. Title 11 Investigation. Body text needs to look like legal gibberish about signature variances and audit holds. Make it look scary. Make it look official. And then I am going to accidentally forward it to Madison. I said I will follow it up with a text saying, oops, ignore that wrong person. Standard plausible deniability. You are evil, Gavin said approvingly. I will have it in your inbox in 10 minutes. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in years. The city lights were blurring past me, streaks of red and gold. When I got to my apartment, the email was waiting. Gavin was a master of legal intimidation. The email referenced statutes, banking regulations, and highlighted a specific concern about unauthorized third-party execution of documents dated between 2005 and 2010. It was vague enough to be nonsense to a lawyer, but specific enough to sound like a death sentence to a guilty woman. I hit forward. I typed in Madison's email address. I knew she had her notifications on push. It would light up her phone instantly. I hit send. I waited exactly 60 seconds. Then I sent a text to Madison. OMG. Madison, I am so sorry. Please delete that email I just sent. I meant to send it to my other lawyer. My hands are shaking so bad right now. Please just delete it without reading it. Do not show anyone. I set the phone down on my kitchen counter. I poured myself a glass of water and stood by the window looking out at the Chicago skyline. I could picture the scene in Harmony Hills right now. Madison would forward that email to Sienna within seconds. Sienna would run to Karen and Franklin. They would huddle around a computer screen reading words like signature variances and criminal investigation. Karen would realize that her gift to Sienna was about to attract the kind of scrutiny that puts people in prison. Franklin would realize that his sloppy forgeries from 15 years ago were about to be examined by experts looking for bank fraud. And because they thought the bank was the target, they would think they could outsmart the system. They wouldn't call me. They wouldn't call a lawyer because that would require admitting the crime. No, they would try to fix it themselves. They would panic. Karen would start shredding things. Franklin would try to move money around to cover the holes in the trust, creating new wire transfer records. They might even try to forge a new deed or backdate a document to justify the old withdrawals. And every single move they made to fix it would create a fresh time-stamped piece of evidence for me. My phone buzzed. It was Madison. "Don't worry, babe." Deleted it immediately. Didn't even read it. "Hope everything is okay." I smiled. The lie was so transparent it was almost insulting. She had read it. She had screenshot it. She had probably printed it out. "Thank you, Madison," I said to the empty room. "You were a terrible roommate, but you are an excellent carrier pigeon." The morning after I planted the seed of panic with Madison, Gavin executed the second phase of our strategy at exactly 9 o'clock. His paralegal filed a lease pendens with the county recorder's office. It was a simple document. In Latin, it meant suit pending. In plain English, it was a giant red flag planted directly into the digital bedrock of the property title. It notified the world that the ownership of the Harmony Hills clubhouse was under legal dispute. It did not seize the clubhouse, but it froze it, paralyzed it. No title company would insure a transfer. No bank would refinance a lien. And most importantly, Karen could not legally gift the rights to Sienna because the deed was now radioactive. Once Gavin confirmed the filing was active in the public database, I did something I had not done since I was a teenager. I turned off my phone. I did not just put it on silent. I powered it down, tossed it into a drawer in my kitchen, and walked away. For the next 3 days, I ceased to exist for the Voss family. To them, I was a ghost. I was a looming shadow that had threatened to destroy their world and then vanished into the ether. Silence is a terrifying weapon. When you scream at someone, you give them a focal point for their anger. You give them something to push back against. But when you are silent, you force them to sit alone in a room with their own guilt and paranoia. You force them to imagine the worst. I spent those 72 hours reclaiming my nervous system. I went to a spa on the north side, had a massage, read a book that had nothing to do with real estate law. I let the tension melt out of my shoulders. I let the silence do its work. 3 days later, I turned my phone back on. The flood of messages was glorious. Missed calls from Karen, frantic texts from Franklin, even a voicemail from Sienna that started with "Reagan, please, I'm so sorry," and ended with sobbing. Madison had sent 17 texts begging for more information. I ignored them all. I opened the HOA neighborhood app instead. The gala was tomorrow night. The banner on the digital marquee still read, "Congratulations, Sienna, new owner of our beloved clubhouse," with little heart emojis. I smiled. The night of the gala arrived like a fever dream. I walked into the clubhouse wearing the same black dress I had worn to my mother's funeral, the one Karen had once called too somber for community events. Aunt Loretta was on my arm, invited as my guest. The room was packed. String lights twinkled. A string quartet played. Sienna floated from group to group, laughing too hard, touching people's arms, desperate to keep the energy high. Her eyes were darting around the room, checking the exits, checking the mood. Then she saw me. She froze mid-laugh. Her silver dress shimmered as she stiffened. She tapped Karen on the shoulder. Karen turned, saw me, and her hand flew to her throat. Franklin followed their gaze. For a second, the mask slipped. I saw pure, unadulterated hatred on my father's face. He took a step forward, his instinct to bully me rising to the surface. But then he looked around. He saw the dean. He saw his golf buddies. He saw the audience. He stopped. He forced his facial muscles into a grimace that was technically a smile. I steered Loretta toward them. The crowd parted. It was like the Red Sea, but with more Botox and tuxedo rentals. "Dad," I said when we were within earshot. "Karen, Sienna, beautiful party." "Reagan," Karen hissed, her voice low enough that only we could hear, but the smile remained plastered on her face. "What are you doing here?" "I told you. I am Aunt Loretta's guest," I interrupted, my voice pleasant and loud enough for the dean to hear. She didn't want to drive alone at night. You know how her eyes are. I turned to Sienna. She looked nauseous. "Happy graduation, Sienna," I said. "It is quite an achievement." "You shouldn't be here," Sienna whispered, her eyes wet with angry tears. "You are trying to ruin this." "Ruin it?" I asked, feigning shock. "I am here to celebrate. I wanted to see the start of your new life." I leaned in closer, invading her personal space just enough to make her flinch. "I just wanted to tell you that I hope you get everything you deserve," I said. The words hung there. Everything you deserve. To the dean standing nearby, it sounded like a sisterly blessing. To Sienna, who knew about the forensic accountant and the IP logs, it sounded like a curse. "Thank you," she choked out, trapped by social convention. "You are welcome," I said. I stepped back, taking a sip of my champagne. "Carry on. Don't let me interrupt." I moved away, pulling Loretta with me. We found a high-top table near the edge of the dance floor. From here, we had a panoramic view of the disaster that was about to unfold. The party continued, but the energy had shifted. The guests were distracted. They were watching me, then watching Karen. The tension was palpable. A static charge building in the humid air. 20 minutes later, the music softened. The string quartet stopped playing. A spotlight hit the small stage near the fountain. Karen walked up to the microphone. She adjusted her pearl necklace. She looked sweaty under the lights. Her face flushed a deep, unhealthy red. She tapped the mic. Thump, thump. "If I could have everyone's attention," Karen boomed. Her voice echoed through the glass atrium. The room went silent. "Thank you all for coming," Karen began. She adopted her benevolent community leader persona. "Tonight is about pride. It is about legacy. When Franklin and I look at Sienna, we see the future of this neighborhood." I swirled my champagne. Legacy. The word tasted like ash. "Sienna has worked hard," Karen lied. "She has overcome challenges. Challenges like deciding which fraudulent credit card to use for her spring break trip." I thought, and as she steps out into the world, Karen continued, gaining momentum. "We wanted to give her a foundation, a home, a place where she can build her own dreams, just as we built ours." She was doing it. She was actually doing it. She was going to announce the gift of the clubhouse publicly. She was so deluded, so arrogant that she thought if she said it into a microphone in front of 200 witnesses, it would somehow become true despite the law. "So, it is my honor," Karen said, raising her glass, "to officially welcome Sienna as the new owner of the Harmony Hills Community Clubhouse." Applause broke out. Sienna stepped onto the stage, beaming, waving like a pageant winner, and that was when the doors opened. It was not a guest. He was a man in a beige trench coat, looking rumpled and tired. He held a large manila envelope in his hand. He walked past the security guards who tried to stop him, but he flashed a badge. Not a police badge, but a process server's identification. He walked with purpose. He did not care about the fairy lights. He did not care about the champagne. He walked straight toward the stage. The applause faltered. It died down row by row. As people noticed the intruder, the silence that followed was heavy and confused. Karen was still smiling, her glass raised, but her eyes were darting to the man approaching her. "Excuse me," Karen said into the mic. "This is a private event." The man stopped at the edge of the stage. He looked at the paper in his hand, then looked up at my stepmother. "Karen Voss?" the man asked. His voice was not amplified, but in the dead silence of the room, carried perfectly. "I am in the middle of a speech," Karen snapped. "Security. Karen Voss," the man repeated louder this time. And Franklin Cook, standing next to Sienna, froze. "I have legal documents for you," the man said. He stepped up onto the stage. The audacity of it drew a gasp from the crowd. He thrust the thick envelope toward Karen. "You are served." Karen didn't take it. She backed away as if the envelope contained anthrax. "Get out of here," Karen yelled. "This is harassment. Touch it or don't." "It is served," the man said. He dropped the envelope at Karen's feet. Thwack. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a second envelope. "And Franklin Cook," he said, dropping the second one at my father's feet. "Courtesy of the Circuit Court of Cook County." The man turned around and walked away. He didn't look at anyone. He just walked back down the aisle, past the stunned guests, and out the door. The tableau was frozen. Karen stared at the envelope on the floor. It was stamped with red ink. Everyone in the room knew what that meant. Lawsuits, foreclosures, criminal summons. It didn't matter what was actually inside, though. I knew it was the partition lawsuit and the demand for accounting of the trust. The symbol was enough. The illusion of the perfect HOA family shattered instantly. A lawsuit served at a graduation party. That wasn't just embarrassing. That was catastrophic. That was the kind of scandal that Harmony Hills would talk about for 20 years. Sienna looked at the envelope, then at the audience. Her face crumbled. The golden girl facade dissolved, replaced by the terrified look of a child who realizes the adults aren't in charge anymore. Karen let out a sob, a sharp, ugly sound that the microphone picked up and amplified. The guests began to whisper. The whispers turned into a murmur. "Oh my God! Did she just get served at the party? I heard it was Reagan. Look at Reagan." And they did. Heads turned toward me. I was still standing at the high-top table. I hadn't moved. I hadn't smiled. I hadn't frowned. I was simply bearing witness. Karen looked up. She found me in the crowd. Her face was gray, stripped of all blood and arrogance. She looked old. She looked defeated. She realized in that moment that the enemy wasn't the bank. It wasn't a computer error. It was the stepdaughter she had tried to erase. I met her gaze. I didn't wave. I didn't gloat. I slowly lifted my champagne glass. I tipped it slightly in her direction, a toast to the wreckage she had created. I took a sip. "What happens now?" Aunt Loretta whispered, clutching my arm, her eyes wide with shock at the brutality of what we had just watched. I set the glass down on the table. It made a soft clink. "Now," I said quietly, "now we go home." I turned my back on the stage. I turned my back on Sienna, who was now weeping into her hands while her friends awkwardly filmed it on their phones. I turned my back on Karen, who was bending down to pick up the papers with shaking hands. "That was brutal," Loretta said as we walked toward the exit, the sea of guests parting for us with newfound respect and fear. "That wasn't the end, Loretta," I said, looking straight ahead at the exit doors. "That was just the notification." I pushed open the doors and stepped out into the cold night air. The music inside had not started up again. "It is only step one," I whispered to myself. I checked my watch. The criminal referral for identity theft was sitting on Gavin's desk, ready to be filed on Monday. Tonight, I had taken their reputation. On Monday, I would take their freedom. Let's get ice cream, I said to Loretta. I feel like celebrating. Monday morning arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. The sun was shining over Chicago, bright and indifferent. But in the legal world, a storm was breaking. At exactly 9 o'clock in the morning, Gavin Holt sent the courier. He did not send a standard letter. He sent a binder. It was 3 inches thick, bound in black, entitled, Demand for Restitution and Curing of Breach of Fiduciary Duty. It arrived at the doorstep of the house in Harmony Hills, just as Karen was likely nursing a hangover from the humiliation of the graduation party. The terms inside were absolute. We were no longer asking for an accounting. We were demanding total capitulation. The ultimatum was simple. Karen Voss and Franklin Cook had 72 hours to repay the full principal of the trust fund, $300,000, plus statutory interest compounded over 20 years, which brought the total to nearly $850,000. But Gavin had added a second condition, the one that I knew would stop their hearts. In lieu of immediate cash repayment, the plaintiff will accept the immediate transfer of the remaining 50% interest in the property located at the Harmony Hills Clubhouse, granting Reagan Cook sole ownership in fee simple. They had a choice. Pay me nearly $1 million in cash they did not have or give me the clubhouse. All of it. I sat in my office staring at my phone, waiting for the detonation. Took 45 minutes. My phone rang. The caller ID said, Dad. I let it ring 3 times. I wanted him to sweat. I wanted him to wonder if I had blocked him again. Then I picked up. Hello, I said. Reagan. Franklin's voice was a jagged tear in the silence. He wasn't using his booming authoritative tone anymore. He sounded like an animal caught in a trap, thrashing and desperate. What is this? I just got a book from your lawyer. Are you insane? You want the whole clubhouse. I want what was stolen from me, I said calmly. The trust fund plus interest. The math is all there. That. Gavin had an actuary run the numbers. Actually, if we went to court, the interest might be higher. I am offering you a discount. A discount, Franklin screamed. I could hear the veins popping in his neck through the receiver. You embarrassed us in front of the whole town on Saturday. The dean won't look me in the eye. Sienna hasn't left her room and now you want to take the clubhouse. I already own half the clubhouse. Dad. I reminded him. I am just asking for the other half to cover the debt you owe me. It is a business transaction. You like business, don't you? This isn't business, he yelled. This is family. You are destroying your family. I am balancing the ledger, I said. You have 48 hours left to decide. Cash or the deed. If I don't have an answer by Wednesday at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Gavin files the criminal referral for the identity theft and the bank fraud. There was a silence on the line, a long, heavy silence where I could hear his breathing hitch. He knew. He knew I had the evidence of the credit cards and the fake loans. Reagan, he said, and his voice dropped. The anger evaporated, replaced by a wheedling, pathetic tone that turned my stomach. Reagan, please don't bring the police into this. Think about your sister. Think about my reputation. Can't we just talk? No lawyers. Just you and me, father and daughter. I swiveled my chair to look out the window. You want to meet? Yes, he begged. Come to the house tonight. We will sit down. We will work this out. I can explain everything. There are things you don't know about the money. I did it for us. I will meet you, I said. Good. Good. He breathed, relief flooding his voice. But not alone, I added. I am bringing Aunt Loretta. Loretta, he scoffed. Why her? Because she is the only person in that house who knows how to tell the truth, I said. And I want a witness. If Loretta is not there, I don't walk through the door. Fine, Franklin snapped. Bring her. Just come. 7 o'clock. He hung up. I set the phone down. I felt a vibration in my chest, a mixture of adrenaline and revulsion. He thought he could charm me. He thought that if he got me in the room, he could use the old triggers, the guilt, the intimidation, the "we are family" speech to make me back down. He didn't realize that the Reagan he knew was dead. I spent the afternoon working, though my focus was fractured. My assistant came in around 2 o'clock carrying a large padded envelope. "This came for you," she said. "It was left at the front desk. No courier. Someone just dropped it off." I took the envelope. It was plain brown, thick, and heavy. There was no return address. Just my name, Reagan Cook, typed on a label. I waited until she left the room before I opened it. I slit the top with a letter opener and slid the contents onto my desk. My breath caught in my throat. It was a stack of documents, but these were not photocopies. These were originals, or at least original carbon duplicates, the kind banks used to give customers in the 90s. The paper was thin, yellowed at the edges, and smelled of old filing cabinets and dust. I picked up the top sheet. It was a withdrawal slip from the trust account dated 22 years ago. The amount was $12,000. The signature at the bottom read Cook as trustee, but stapled to it was a handwritten note on a piece of memo pad paper that read "Transfer to personal checking Vegas trip." I flipped to the next one. A withdrawal for $5,000. The memo, Karen's ring resize. I went through the stack. It was a diary of greed. Every single time they had dipped into my mother's money, someone had kept the receipt. Someone had documented exactly where the money went. There were internal bank memos questioning the signatures with handwritten notes in the margins saying, "Override, VIP client." There were even copies of the forged letters sent to the bank pretending to be me. I held one up to the light. The signature Reagan Cook was traced. I could see the indentation where someone had pressed too hard with a ballpoint pen. This was the smoking gun. This proved it wasn't just negligence. It wasn't just borrowing. This was calculated documented theft facilitated by someone on the inside or meticulously archived by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. But who sent it? I turned the envelope over. Nothing. My mind raced. Was it a disgruntled bank employee who had seen the news? Harmony Hills was small. The rumors about the process server at the party had spread like wildfire. Had someone at the bank connected the dots and decided to clear their conscience before the investigation hit? Or was it someone closer? I thought of Aunt Loretta. No, she had given me everything she had. She didn't have access to bank internal memos. I thought of Sienna. Impossible. She was too selfish to hand me the weapon that would destroy her inheritance. I thought of Karen. Had she kept these as leverage against Franklin in case of a divorce? Had she panicked and sent them to me to cut a deal? Karen wasn't that smart. The mystery nagged at me, but I realized it didn't matter. The who was irrelevant. The what was lethal. I had the originals. I had the notes. I had the intent. I put the documents back into the envelope and locked it in my safe. I wouldn't tell Gavin about this yet. And I certainly wouldn't tell Franklin. This was my ace in the hole. If the meeting tonight went sideways, if they tried to lie or deny, I wouldn't just argue. I would know. My phone buzzed again. A text from Madison. "Hey babe, crazy weekend, right? Are you okay? Sienna is saying you guys are meeting tonight to settle everything. She says, you're going to drop the lawsuit." I stared at the screen. The spy was active. They were using Madison to gauge my mindset before the meeting. They wanted to know if I was coming to surrender or to negotiate. I decided to feed the beast. "Hey, Madison. Yeah, I am tired. I just want this over with. If Dad can just explain the accounting errors, I might just let it go. I don't want to send anyone to jail. I am just confused about the paperwork." I hit send. Let them think I was weak. Let them think I was confused. Let them think that if they just came up with a good enough story, a fixing of the paperwork, I would walk away. Because if they thought I was confused, they would try to clarify things. And how do liars clarify things? They fabricate evidence. I called Aunt Loretta. I am picking you up at 6:30, I said. Pack a bag. A bag? Loretta asked. You aren't staying in that house tonight, I said. After I'm done with them, it won't be safe. The toxicity is going to reach critical levels. Okay, she whispered. Reagan, Karen is in the study. She has the door locked. I can hear her using the old typewriter, the one she hasn't touched in years. I smiled. The trap was sprung. Let her type. Loretta, I said. Let her type. Karen was forging documents. She was creating retroactive loan agreements or explanatory notes to justify the theft, thinking that if she showed me a piece of paper that said loan to family, repayment deferred, I would believe it was all a misunderstanding. She was manufacturing fresh evidence of fraud hours before a legal negotiation. I will see you soon, I said. I drove to Harmony Hills as the sun went down. The town looked peaceful, the snow-covered lawns glistening under the streetlights. But I knew the rot that lived behind those manicured hedges. The rumors were already swirling. I stopped at a gas station on the edge of town, and the cashier, a woman I vaguely recognized from high school, looked at me with wide eyes. You're Reagan Cook, she said. It wasn't a question. I am, I said, paying for my water. Is it true? She asked, leaning over the counter. Did you really serve Karen with a lawsuit during the toast? She was served, I said cryptically. I just watched. Damn, she said, shaking her head with a mixture of awe and judgment. That is cold. Winter is cold, I said. Justice is just necessary. I walked out. The town was turning on them. The facade of the perfect Voss family had cracked. And people love to watch a pedestal crumble. I picked up Loretta from the corner down the street from the house. She didn't want to be seen leaving with a suitcase. She looked small in the passenger seat, clutching her purse. She is terrified, Loretta said. But she is also angry. She keeps saying you are ungrateful. She keeps saying you paid the lien to trick her. She tricked herself, I said. We pulled into the driveway. The house was lit up like a beacon. The Christmas lights were still on, a festive mask over a dying face. I turned off the engine. I took a deep breath. Ready? I asked. No, Loretta said. Good, I said. Do it anyway. We walked to the front door. I didn't knock. I used my key, the key to the house I half owned. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Franklin and Karen were waiting in the living room. They had staged the scene. They were sitting on the couch, holding hands. There was a pot of tea on the coffee table. No wine tonight. They wanted to appear sober, serious, and parental. Sienna was not there. They had likely banished her to her room to keep her from saying something stupid. Or perhaps she was hiding in shame. Reagan, Franklin said, standing up. He was wearing a cardigan. He looked like Mr. Rogers. If Mr. Rogers had committed felony bank fraud. Loretta, come in. Sit down. I didn't sit. I stood by the fireplace, keeping my coat on. It was a power move. Said I'm not staying. I am not comfortable. I am not home. We don't need tea. Dad, I said. You said you wanted to talk. Talk. Franklin sighed, a long theatrical exhale. He looked at Karen, who gave him a supportive nod. Reagan, he began, his voice trembling with rehearsed emotion. I know you are angry, and you have a right to be confused. The paperwork, it is messy. I admit that I was not the best bookkeeper. He reached under the coffee table and pulled out a file. It was a new file. The papers inside looked crisp. But I found these, he said, holding them out. I was looking through the old archives today. These are promissory notes from your mother and from me acting as trustee. He walked over and handed them to me. I took the papers. I didn't need to be a forensic expert to see what they were. The paper was new standard printer paper, not the heavy bond they used 20 years ago. The type was fresh, the ink black and sharp, but the dates at the top were from 2005, 2008, 2010. They were typed on a typewriter to look old, but the paper gave it away. And the signatures, they were shaky. These are notes authorizing the use of funds for family maintenance, Franklin explained, watching my face closely. See, says right there, the money wasn't stolen. It was a loan. A loan to the family entity to be repaid when the clubhouse was sold eventually. It was all legal. I looked at him. I looked at the pathetic forgery in my hand. He had spent the afternoon typing these. He thought I was stupid. He thought that because I was his daughter, I would look at these clumsy fakes and accept them because I wanted to believe him. He was handing me the rope. So, I said, keeping my voice neutral, you are saying that these documents have existed for 20 years and they authorize you to take the money. Yes, Franklin said eagerly. Exactly. I just misplaced them, but I found them. So you see, there was no fraud, no theft, just bad filing. And Karen signed these, too, I asked, pointing to the witness line. I did, Karen said, her voice high and tight. I remember signing them. I remember it clearly. She was lying. She was lying to cover a lie, creating a perjury trap for herself. This changes things, I said. It does, Franklin said, smiling now. It clears everything up. So, you can tell your lawyer to stop. We don't need to fight. The clubhouse is well. The clubhouse is complicated, but we can work out a payment plan for the loan over time. Sienna can still have her gift and we will pay you back slowly. He was trying to negotiate the surrender. He wanted to keep the clubhouse, keep the money, and pay me back on some imaginary schedule that he would never honor. I folded the papers and put them in my bag. I will show these to my lawyer, I said. Franklin's smile faltered. Why? You don't need to. We just settled it. I need to file them, I said. If they are real, they need to be part of the record to clear your name. Right? Franklin said, sweating again. Right? Of course. I looked at Aunt Loretta. She was staring at her brother with a look of pure sorrow. She knew. She recognized the typewriter font. She knew he had just dug his own grave. Is that all? I asked. Well, Franklin said, shifting on his feet. About the deadline, the 72 hours. Since we found these, we can drop that, right? I looked him in the eye. The deadline stands. Dad, I said. What? He snapped. But I just gave you the proof. You gave me paper, I said. My lawyer will verify the age of the paper. He has a way of dating ink. It is a fascinating process. If these are 20 years old, you have nothing to worry about. Franklin went pale, dead pale. But if they were typed today, I continued, my voice dropping to a whisper, then this isn't proof. This is tampering with evidence. And that is a felony that carries 5 years on its own. The room went silent. The air was sucked out of the space. Franklin realized what he had done. I had baited him with the confusion text. He had taken the bait. He had created the fakes and he had just handed them to me, the prosecution. You, he stammered. You tricked me. No, I said. I gave you a chance to tell the truth. You chose to type a lie. I turned to the door. Come on, Loretta. You can't take her, Karen shrieked, standing up. She lives here. Not anymore, I said. She is the witness and I am placing her in protective custody because when the police come for the identity theft charges on Wednesday, I don't want her caught in the crossfire. I opened the door. The cold wind rushed in. Wednesday, Dad, I said without looking back. 5 o'clock. Cash or keys? I walked out, Loretta right behind me. As I closed the door, I heard the sound of a glass shattering against the wall. Franklin had finally lost his temper, but it was too late. He had given me the rope. Now all I had to do was kick the chair. The neutral ground was a small beige apartment on the south side of Harmony Hills. It was Aunt Loretta's sanctuary, a place filled with crocheted blankets, and the smell of peppermint tea, a stark contrast to the cold curated museum where I had grown up. Franklin had begged for this meeting. He called it a peace summit. I called it a deposition. I sat at the small kitchen table. The surface was formica, chipped at the edges. In the center of the table, I placed my phone face down. Gavin had instructed me carefully. Illinois is a two-party consent state for recording, but there is an exception if you have no expectation of privacy or if you simply inform him. I am recording this, Dad, I said the moment he walked through the door. Franklin paused in the entryway. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. The grandeur of the graduation party was gone. He was wearing a windbreaker and slacks that looked like they hadn't been pressed. He looked at the phone, then at me, then at Aunt Loretta standing by the sink with her arms crossed. Fine, he said, his voice raspy. Record it. I want the truth on record. 2. He sat down opposite me. He didn't reach for the tea. He placed his hands on the table, clasping them together to stop them from shaking. You gave me a deadline, he said. Wednesday 5 o'clock. That is the deadline, I confirmed. Cash or keys? I can't raise $300,000 in 2 days. Reagan, he said. And I can't give you the clubhouse. If I sign the deed over to you, Karen will leave me. Sienna won't survive the scandal. Then you should have thought about that before you typed those fake promissory notes, I said. Felony forgery tends to complicate a marriage. Franklin flinched. He looked down at his hands. I didn't come here to argue about the law, he said softly. I came here to tell you why. You think I'm a monster. You think I woke up one day and decided to steal from you, but you don't know the whole story. You don't know about your mother. I felt a cold spike in my chest. Leave her out of this. I can't, he said. Because she is the reason for all of this. He took a breath. A shuddering intake of air that sounded like a drowning man trying to fill his lungs. I didn't marry Elena for love, he said. The words landed on the table like dead birds. I didn't blink. I didn't gasp. I just watched him. I married her because I was 25, ambitious, and broke, Franklin continued. Her family had the connections I needed to start the business. They had the capital. It was an arrangement. She knew it. I knew it. We were partners. And I was the merger acquisition, I asked. You were the obligation, he said. It was the most honest thing he had ever said to me. It was cruel, visceral, and absolutely devastating. But it didn't hurt. Clarified. It explained 37 years of cold shoulders, of missed birthdays, of the way he looked at me like I was a bill he had already paid but kept receiving invoices for. When she died, Franklin said, his eyes unfocused, looking past me at the peeling wallpaper. I felt relief. God help me. I felt free. But then there was the trust. That money sat there, locked away in your name, a constant reminder of the transaction, a reminder that I was still dependent on her family's money even after she was gone. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading for an understanding I refused to give. I used it because I felt I earned it, he said. I gave her 7 years of my life. I gave her a child. I kept the house running. Why should that money sit in an account collecting dust while I struggled to keep up appearances? I used it to build the life we had. I used it for Karen. I used it for Sienna. It was family money. Reagan, it stayed in the house. In the house, I repeated. But not in my name. You were part of the house, he argued, his voice rising. You lived there. You ate the food. You wore the clothes. You went to school. That money paid for the heat you enjoyed. Paid for the car you drove to high school. It wasn't stealing. It was reallocation. And the identity theft? I asked. The credit cards you opened in my name 3 years ago. The loans for Sienna's bedroom set. Was that reallocation? Too. Franklin stopped. He opened his mouth, then closed it. The justification engine in his brain was stalling. That was desperation, he whispered. The business was failing. Karen needed things. Sienna needed to keep up with her friends. I couldn't tell them we were broke. I couldn't let them see me fail. You had good credit. Reagan, you were stable. I thought I could pay it back before you noticed. But you didn't, I said. You just kept taking. I am your father. He slammed his hand on the table. The sudden violence made Loretta jump. But I didn't move. Doesn't that mean anything? I raised you. I put a roof over your head. You put a roof over my head using my mother's money. I corrected him. And then you tried to kick me out from under it. I leaned forward. My voice was low, devoid of the emotional hysterics he wanted. You aren't sorry, Dad, I said. You aren't crying because you hurt me. You aren't shaking because you realized you were a bad father. You are shaking because the music stopped. Reagan, you are shaking because you got caught. I said you lived on a lie for 20 years. You ate well. You drank expensive wine. You played the big man at the country club. And you put it all on my tab. And now the waiter is here with the bill. And you are terrified because your wallet is empty. Franklin stared at me. He looked like a man who had just seen his own reflection for the first time and was horrified by the monster staring back. My phone buzzed on the table. It vibrated against the formica. I glanced at the screen. It was a notification from my security app. My real one, not the fake one I showed Madison. But then a text popped up. It was from Madison. OMG Reagan. Sienna just called me screaming. She says Karen told her everything. She says they are going to arrest you. Is that true? She is freaking out saying she didn't sign anything. I read the message and a cold smile touched my lips. Karen. Karen wasn't at this meeting. Franklin had come alone. Karen was at home, likely pacing the floors, realizing that her husband was cornered. And like a rat on a sinking ship, she was starting to eat the other rats. She had told Sienna, and she had likely spun it to make it look like Franklin and I were the villains, and that Sienna needed to protect herself. Your wife is busy, I said, looking up at Franklin. What? He asked, confused. Karen, I said. She just told Sienna about the criminal charges. She is poisoning the well, that she is telling Sienna that you are the problem. She is setting you up to take the fall alone. Franklin's face went white. No, Karen wouldn't. We are in this together. Are you? I asked. Because the documents I received yesterday, the originals, the withdrawal slips with the handwritten notes about her ring resize and the Vegas trips. I paused, watching the realization hit him. Twist number 8 was landing. I had wondered who sent the anonymous package. I thought it might be a bank employee, but as I looked at Franklin's terrified face, I realized the truth. The documents were too specific. They were the receipts of the crimes. Who keeps receipts of a crime? The accomplice who wants insurance? Karen had sent them. Karen had sent me the smoking gun 2 days ago. She knew the ship was going down. She knew I was coming for them. And she decided that if someone had to go to jail, it should be Franklin, not her. She gave me the evidence to nail him, hoping I would spare her in exchange for her cooperation. She sent them to me, I said, the realization turning into words. The anonymous package. It was Karen. Franklin shook his head. No. She loves me. She loves the house, I said. She loves the status and she loves her freedom. She sold you out, Dad. She gave me the originals. She kept them for 20 years just for this moment. Franklin slumped in his chair. The betrayal was physical. He looked like he had been shot in the gut. The woman he had stolen for, the woman he had erased my mother for, had been keeping a dossier on him the entire time. Did she keep them? He whispered. Every single one, I said with notes. Karen's ring. Karen's car. She made sure your name was on the withdrawal slips, not hers. I stood up. I picked up my phone and stopped the recording. The file saved instantly to the cloud. So, here is where we stand, I said. I have your confession on tape. I have the original documents proving the theft, courtesy of your loving wife. I have the forensic accounting proving the identity theft. I walked to the door. You have until Wednesday at 5, I repeated. But honestly, Dad, I don't think you can fix this. I think you are going to lose the clubhouse. I think you are going to lose your wife. And I think you are going to prison. Franklin didn't stand up. He just sat there staring at his hands alone in the small beige kitchen. Reagan, he croaked as I opened the door. Please. I stopped. I looked back at him. I tried to find a shred of pity in my heart. I looked for the little girl who used to wait up for him to come home from work. I looked for the daughter who just wanted him to say he was proud of her, but she wasn't there. He had spent her inheritance to buy a chaise lounge for her sister. You said I was a reminder of your guilt, I said, my voice as cold as the Illinois winter. Well, Dad, consider me the final notice. I walked out. Loretta followed me to the car. She was crying silently. He is broken, she whispered as we got in. He was always broken, I said. Starting the engine. I just turned on the lights so everyone could see the cracks. I drove away from the apartment complex. My phone buzzed again. It was Sienna this time. Reagan, please pick up. Mom is acting crazy. She is packing suitcases. She says she is going to her sister's. Is Dad going to jail? Am I going to jail? I didn't know about the credit cards. I swear. I looked at the text at the red light. Sienna was panicking. Karen was fleeing. Franklin was catatonic. The implosion was total. But I wasn't done. They were turning on each other. Yes, but I needed one last thing. I needed the clubhouse. Not just for the money. I needed to take the physical symbol of their vanity and turn it into a monument to my mother. I had the leverage. I had the confession. Now, I just needed to execute the final maneuver. Where are we going? Loretta asked. To the office, I said. We need to draft the settlement agreement because by tomorrow morning, Franklin will be ready to sign anything to save himself from Karen. I drove into the night, the city of Chicago rising up before me like a fortress. The battle was effectively won, but the war required an unconditional surrender, and I was going to get it in writing. Wednesday at 5 o'clock arrived not with a bang but with the terrifying precision of a digital clock changing digits. The deadline passed. No wire transfer appeared in my account. No surrender document arrived at Gavin's office. Franklin and Karen had paralyzed themselves with indecision, hoping that if they just stayed quiet, the storm would blow over. They chose the ostrich strategy. They buried their heads in the sand, forgetting that their exposed bodies were still liable for prosecution. At 5:01, Gavin hit send. The criminal referral packet, thick with forensic accounting, and the original withdrawal slips Karen had mailed me, was electronically filed with the district attorney's office and the postal inspection service. Simultaneously, Gavin filed the motion for summary judgment in civil court, attaching the co-ownership clause and the evidence of the trust theft. The war was no longer private. It was now a matter of public record. By Thursday morning, the Harmony Hills rumor mill had turned into a hurricane. The filing of a fraud lawsuit involving a prominent local family and a $720,000 property dispute was catnip for the local press. But the real damage didn't come from the courthouse. It came from TikTok. Twist number 9 arrived via a notification from Madison Klein. She didn't text me a fake message of support this time. She sent me a link with no caption. I opened it. It was a video taken on a cell phone during the graduation party. Clearly filmed by one of Sienna's friends from behind a fern. The angle was shaky, but the audio was crystal clear. It captured the moments immediately after the process server had dropped the envelopes on the stage. In the video, Karen was hunched over the papers, but Sienna was the focal point. She was screaming, her face was contorted, her makeup running, the perfect golden girl mask completely shattered. "You promised?" Sienna shrieked in the video, stomping her foot like a toddler. "You said the clubhouse was mine. You said Reagan was out. You promised me the deed was in the safe." Then Karen's voice cut in shrill and panicked. "Quiet, Sienna. Not here. I don't care," Sienna yelled back, shoving her mother's hand away. "I told everyone it was mine. I already picked out the furniture. Fix it, Dad. You said you used her money to buy it so we could keep it. Fix it." The video ended. I watched it 3 times. It was brutal. It was viral gold. But legally it was a confession. "You said you used her money to buy it." Sienna had just admitted on camera in front of witnesses that she knew the clubhouse was purchased with my funds, and that the gift was a premeditated act of exclusion. She wasn't an innocent beneficiary. She was a co-conspirator who was angry that the loot hadn't been delivered. The public sympathy that Franklin might have tried to cultivate evaporated instantly. They weren't a struggling family being bullied by a rich daughter. They were grifters turning on each other because the heist failed. On Friday morning, I went to the house. I did not go alone. I brought Gavin. I brought Aunt Loretta. And I brought 2 off-duty sheriff's deputies hired as private security. We were there to execute a court-ordered preservation of assets. Since the clubhouse was now evidence in a fraud investigation and subject to a partition lawsuit, I had the legal right to enter, inspect, and secure my property. We pulled into the driveway. The "Congratulations Graduate" banner was still hanging on the porch, but it was sagging now, torn by the wind, looking like a surrendered flag. I unlocked the front door. The house was silent. It smelled of stale coffee and fear. Boxes were stacked in the hallway, haphazardly taped, as if someone had started packing and then given up. Franklin and Karen were in the kitchen. They looked like ghosts. Franklin hadn't shaved in days. Karen was wearing a bathrobe at 11 in the morning, her eyes swollen. Sienna was nowhere to be seen. Loretta told me she had fled to a friend's house the moment the video went viral. They didn't speak when I walked in. They just stared at me. The deputies stood by the door, arms crossed, silent sentinels of the new reality. "We are here to catalog the assets," Gavin announced, his voice filling the room. "Nothing leaves this house. No furniture. No electronics. No documents. This is now a secured site pending the outcome of the litigation." Franklin looked at me. "Reagan, please. Save it," I said. "You had until Wednesday." I walked past them. I walked through the living room where the Christmas tree still stood, its lights off, looking dead and plastic. I walked into the library. Aunt Loretta followed me. She was trembling, but she held her head high. She walked over to the built-in bookshelves that lined the far wall. "My mom loved this room," I said, running my hand along the mahogany. "She did," Loretta said softly. "She spent hours in here, hiding from him. Most," Loretta paused. She looked at a specific panel of wood near the bottom shelf, behind a row of encyclopedias that hadn't been moved in decades. "Reagan," she said, "I need to check something." "Check what?" "Your mother," Loretta whispered. "Before she died, she was sick, but her mind was sharp. She told me once that if anything ever happened, if things got bad, I should look for the heart of the house." Loretta knelt down. She pushed aside the heavy books. She ran her fingers along the molding of the wood panel. It looked solid, but Loretta pressed on a small knot in the wood, a flaw that looked natural. Click. The panel popped open. My heart stopped. It wasn't just a panel. It was a false back. Behind the wood was a small gray metal safe embedded in the wall. "He never knew," Loretta said, tears streaming down her face. "Franklin never read books. He never dusted in here. He never knew." "Do you have the combination?" I asked, dropping to my knees beside her. "No," Loretta said, "but Elena said the code was the day she realized she loved you more than she feared him." I closed my eyes. I thought about the dates. My birthday? No. Her anniversary? Definitely not. Then I remembered. I remembered a story she used to tell me when I was 5. She told me about the day we ran away to the park, just the two of us, and sat under a willow tree while she promised me that no matter what, I was her world. It was May 4th, 1992. I reached out. My fingers shook as I turned the dial. 5-4-9-2. The handle turned. The heavy steel door swung open. It wasn't empty. Inside, there was no cash. There were no jewels. There was just a thick cream-colored envelope sealed with red wax and a small velvet box. I took the envelope out. It had my name on it, Reagan, written in my mother's elegant looping cursive. I opened the velvet box first. Inside was her engagement ring, the real one, the one Franklin had told me was lost or sold to pay for medical bills. It was a vintage sapphire, dark and deep as the ocean. He hadn't sold it. She had hidden it. She had saved it from him so he couldn't pawn it for his vanity. Then I opened the letter. I unfolded the paper. It was dated 3 weeks before she died. "My dearest Reagan, if you are reading this, then my worst fears have come to pass. And your father has let you down. I am writing this because I know Franklin. I know his hunger for status is a beast that can never be fed. I have tried to protect your trust fund, but I fear he will find a way to break it. He is charming and he is desperate, and that is a dangerous combination. I am leaving this letter as a final safeguard. Enclosed is the original deed of gift for the funds used to purchase this land. Money that came from my grandmother, not your father. And more importantly, I have stated in my will, the one I filed with my attorney in the city, not the one Franklin knows about, that this clubhouse is to be held in constructive trust for you. He may put his name on the door, Reagan, but the foundation is yours. Do not let him take your spirit. He is small. You are vast. Fight for what is yours, not for the money, but for the principle. I love you, my brave girl. Mom." I sat there on the floor of the library, the letter shaking in my hands. Twist number 10 hit me harder than any legal victory. My mother hadn't just been a victim. She had been a strategist. She had known. She had seen Franklin for exactly what he was, a parasite. And she had planted a time bomb in the walls of his own house, waiting for me to find the detonator. She had predicted this. She had predicted the theft. She had predicted the need for me to fight, and she had given me the final weapon. The constructive trust language meant that even if Franklin's name was on the title, the equitable ownership had always belonged to me because the money was traced to her specific bequest. I wasn't just claiming the clubhouse because I paid the lien. I was claiming the clubhouse because it had been mine since 1995. I stood up. I wiped the single tear that had escaped. I put the ring in my pocket. I held the letter like a sword. I walked back into the kitchen. Franklin and Karen looked up. They saw the letter in my hand. They saw the look on my face. It was the look of an executioner who has just sharpened the blade. "What is that?" Franklin asked, his voice trembling. "A letter from Mom," I said. Franklin paled. "Elena, that is impossible. She hid it," I said. "In the library, the room you never entered because you were too busy staring at yourself in the mirror." I threw the letter on the table. Read it or don't. It doesn't matter. It proves that the funds used to buy this clubhouse were conditional. It proves you have been living in a house that belonged to me for 20 years. Karen grabbed the letter. She read it, her lips moving silently. Then she dropped it as if it burned her. She looked at Franklin with pure venom. You said you owned it, she hissed at him. You said the money was yours. It was, Franklin stammered. We were married. It was never yours, Dad, I said. You were just the squatter. Gavin stepped forward. He placed a document on the table. It was a quitclaim deed, transferring 100% of the property to Reagan Cook. Next to it was a settlement agreement. Here's the deal, Gavin said, his voice devoid of emotion. You sign this. You sign the clubhouse over to Reagan immediately. You vacate the premises within 48 hours. In exchange, Reagan agrees to pause the civil litigation regarding the back interest on the trust. The criminal referral? Well, that is up to the DA now. But if you make restitution by giving her the asset, it might help your plea bargain. Franklin stared at the pen. I can't, he whispered. This is my home. No, I said. This is a crime scene and I am evicting the criminal. Franklin looked at Karen. She turned away from him. She was already mentally calculating her divorce settlement, realizing there was nothing left to take. He looked at the door where the deputies stood. He looked at the empty spot where Sienna should have been. He started to cry. It was a pathetic wheezing sound. We are family, he sobbed. Reagan, please. Family? I looked at him. I touched the sapphire ring in my pocket. I thought of the $720,000. I thought of the stolen credit cards. I thought of the graduation party where he tried to erase me. Family, I said, repeating his word. You are right, Dad. Family is important. I tapped the letter from my mother. My family left me this letter to protect me from you, I said. Family doesn't need me to stay silent so you can look rich. Family needed me to be protected. I pointed to the line for his signature. Sign it, I commanded, or the deputies take you out in handcuffs right now for the identity theft charges I have on my phone. Franklin picked up the pen. His hand shook so violently he could barely hold it. He looked at the paper. He looked at the kitchen, the granite countertops, the high-end appliances, the symbols of the life he had stolen. He signed. Karen signed next, sobbing loudly. Not for him, but for her loss of status. Gavin took the papers. He checked the signatures. He notarized them on the spot with his stamp. It is done, Gavin said. The clubhouse is yours. Reagan. I didn't feel a rush of joy. I didn't feel like cheering. I felt a profound, quiet weight lifting off my shoulders. It was the weight of a lifetime of trying to buy their love, finally dropping to the floor. Get out, I said. Reagan, Franklin pleaded. Where will we go? I don't know, I said. But I hear apartments in the city are affordable if you have a roommate. Maybe you and Karen can share a studio. I turned away from them. I walked into the living room. I stood in front of the large bay window looking out over the snowy lawn of Harmony Hills. I could hear them shuffling behind me. I could hear Gavin giving them instructions on what they could and could not take. I could hear the end of an era. I looked at the Christmas tree. I reached out and unplugged it. The room went dim, illuminated only by the winter sun streaming in through the glass. I had come here on Christmas night as a victim. I was leaving as the owner. I had paid the debt. I had uncovered the lies. I had reclaimed my name. I looked at my reflection in the window. I looked like my mother. I paid $720,000 to save a clubhouse. I whispered to the empty room, the words feeling right. Today, I took back a life. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope Reagan's victory gave you the satisfaction we all crave when justice is served. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Please comment below with your country or city so we can see how far this story has traveled. If you enjoyed this revenge drama, please make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring more of these emotional, realistic stories to life. See you in the next one.